Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we're gonna talk a little bit about lambdas, and I already have a video about lambdas and I will include that in the description of the video and also as a linked video to this video. And lambdas are things that you can define somewhere in your code and then send them through to other functions. You can use them in streaming APIs and you can use them in your function definition. So we are going to look more at what kind of things can you create with lambdas and what can you do with them. So let's jump over to some code here. There is actually some things that I didn't mention in my video, and that's that there are 3 different standard interfaces for lambdas. The most commonly used and easiest things to implement. So let's say, for instance, that we want to have a print function that prints stuff. So let's create a public void function here that will print some data, for instance. And that print function, it will have a supplier with a string. So we will send something to it that it can print. So let's say that this is a supplier there, or we can call it for supplier. And here in this print function, we want to take something that can print. So for instance, in this case, we want the system out print line and this supplier, and then get the value of this supplier. When do you want to do this kind of a thing? It's not that commonly used, but in my case, for instance, I had something that I defined in an abstract class that was something that got a version number, for instance. But that version number was something that I didn't want it to fetch for me until it actually was required in the program. But I needed it to define it in that class because it was together with some other information. So in that case, I created a supplier that gave me the string plus the version information from the interface or the abstract class, but I could actually take it and run it later on. So in this case, it's a superficial thing, a superficial example this, but here I can give it a supplier that says hello world, for instance. So that will be, we need to make this static, of course, because it's not a static function. So now I can give it a string here, hello world, and that will print hello world for us. But we can say whatever we want there, but it's just running when we actually are running this supplier down here. So that's the difference that we have. Now let's say that we have something that we want to provide information to. So we will switch this around and have a function that actually can print something, but we don't want to say what it actually does. We say it's just a provider with a string. We can change provider here, or no, consumer. Consumer is the consumer. So that's a consumer, and it takes a value instead. So let's say that we have that. We have something that consumes. So we want to run the specific function that does something inside of our function. And in this case, I'm going to create something that prints, but you can do whatever you want. So you do consumer, and it will accept this hello world instead. And up here I can run this print function and give it something that consumes instead. So this will have a string here, and then we will do a system out print line and then print that out. So that's more something that you define. I want you to do something down here with a value. I give you the value, but I want to change the meaning on what that actually is. So for instance, I can have a print function up here, but I can also print it as an error. So I supply two different things that it actually does with the value that I provide inside of the function, and this will be printed as both the standard out and also as an error message. So I can supply different things that I want to do with the value inside our function. And the last thing that we want to do is actually to have a function. And a function is something that takes a value and then returns another value. So for instance, here I can say that I want this func, and I want to print it again. Out print line, and I want to print this function, and I want to apply the string explorers. So let's say that, and then up here I need to give it a function. So in this case it will return hello. So now I give it a value and it will return another value. So if I run this function, it will pretty much, as you might think, return hello, but I want to return with this plus s, a little bit of a difference there. So I supplied explorers, so it says hello explorers. So that's the functional interface that you can use. So these are the most simple ways to create things that can take a value and return another value, take a value and do something with it, or supply a value back. But we can also have a single class definition. Let's say class compute. And this class compute has only one functional interface in it. It returns an int and then compute something of two ints here, a and int b. So let's see here. Oh, and this needs to be an interface, of course. So now I have created some kind of an interface with just one function, and the name of the function here is not important because I'm not going to use that. But let's say, for instance, that we want to, again, system out print line, and then we will print something that we have a compute here. And this class is null at the moment, but we will print that out there. Then we can supply something here, a plus b, and then we will have an implementation of this, which is a plus b. So this compute will compute these two values and return the results down here. Yeah, we need to run this compute, of course. So 2 plus 1. And if we run that, we need to give it some values. It will give us 3 back. But I can define this lambda as times, for instance, or anything like that. If we want, we can change this interface down here to have 3 values and perhaps return a double. And then it tells us up here that this is not correct because you have supplied something that doesn't really have the correct amount of values up here. And perhaps I can say that the C should be a string. So I can say the C should be something that I add to these two. And then I need to return a string as well because that's what it actually will become afterwards. So now I can supply 3 values, and the C is, for instance, value here. And then we will get another printout here that says value 2. So we can actually string up these interfaces in very interesting ways that we can use either a very simple implementation or a very simple API like these functions, suppliers, or consumers, or we can create our own interfaces and then reuse that as our lambda functions in our code, depending on the use case that we are required to have. So this was what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If you have any suggestions, questions, leave them down in the comment section down below. Are you using a lot of lambdas in your code? And do you either use the simple interfaces, or do you use the more complex interfaces where you create something that is more tailored to your use case? What is the most common in your work environment? If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues, and I really hope to see you in the next video.